To speak more about the Leafs' new head coach, here's Bryan Hayes. Bryan, there's no salary cap when it comes to hiring a coach. The Leafs could have gone any direction they'd liked. They could have outbid any other contenders for whoever they wanted. Are you convinced the Leafs got the best person available for the job in Craig Berube?
Yes, I do. And I do think that they likely did outbid other teams that wanted Craig Berube. And listen, I think it would have been great if Rod Brindamore was willing to come up here. I have not been of that impression at any point, Gino, that was the case. I think he wants to stay in Carolina. Would I love to see John Cooper up here? Absolutely. I don't think he was leaving Tampa. My guess would be the Leafs would be willing and probably looked in to every possible option. But of the free agents that were available, the Berubes, the McClellans, and others, I think Craig Berube is the right guy. I think he's won recently. I think he's got the right demeanor, right attitude. He has media training. He's played here before. It was a brief stop, but he factored into that famous Doug Gilmour trade. So he's actually paid off for Leaf fans in the past going the other way in the Gilmour deal. So I think they probably did that, Gino, in terms of making sure they paid more than anyone to make sure that they got their guy in Craig Berube. I think he fits in line with the way Brad Treliving wants to build this team, the way he sees this team having success in the future. And I think Berube's a good coach. I think he's an inspiring coach. I think he's a communicator. I think he's a motivator. I think things are going to change around here. I definitely think that's mandatory, and I think that's why Berube's officially been hired here in Toronto.
He's a winner. He's got a different demeanor, and he motivates in different styles than they're used to. Last season, Berube was ticked with his players and said, our best players don't play with any passion, no emotion, and no inspiration at all. They're getting paid lots of money, and they're not doing their job. Can this group of players on this Toronto Maple Leaf team handle this kind of public admonishment if he feels that's what he needs to bring to this team?
I think we'll find that out. I think the players that are willing to accept that will be the ones that will stick around. I think the player personnel change, that's the big step now, right? The first move was moving on from Sheldon Keefe, finding your next coach. We know who that is. It's Craig Berube. The next moves here for Brad Treliving and Brendan Shanahan are to find out which players are willing to accept that. Because if you've hired Berube, you've hired him to be who he is. Not just because he was in St. Louis, a smaller marker. You expect him to bring that same attitude, that same approach to Toronto. And I actually think, Gino, it's the perfect time for that to happen. Because I think the fans and the player approval rating is as low as it's ever been. And I think fans are sick and tired of this idea that the players have been catered to, that the players have had more of a friend behind the bench as opposed to someone that's simply there to motivate and push buttons and make sure that they can win. And I'm not saying that's 100% fair to Sheldon Keefe. I'm not saying Keefe was their friend, but the perception was you went from Babcock to Keefe, that it was going to be a little bit easier for the players to operate. And I think that has to change. I think fans want it to change. Two of the most popular figures in Toronto sports, forget coaches, figures. That includes players, management, coaches, Pat Quinn, Pat Burns. We've seen them have a lot of success here in the last 30 years, and they did not hold back. They were not shy, and they understood that there's a shelf life. And the same thing will happen with Berube here. Berube's not going to be here for a decade. Unless he wins 2 or 3 cups, he will not be here for a decade. But Craig Berube, I think, arrives with his style at a perfect time because I think fans want that. They want to hear something different. They want a different approach. And if you're a player here, you better be thinking the same thing. If you're Austin Matthews, if you're William Nylander, if you're Morgan Riley, John Tavares, whoever's going to be here long term, they've been in the league for a long time. They haven't won a thing. They've won 1 round. They better be willing to buy into whatever Berube's selling. He's not here to be their friend, but he's here to motivate them, to put a game plan together, and to make sure he pushes the right buttons to get them over the top. And I can guarantee you this, they will love this hire if that's exactly what he does. If Berube pushes the right buttons and they put the right pieces around him, because more has to happen here. We all know that. This is not a Stanley Cup winning roster right now. They need to make moves, and that's where Treliving comes in next. But if he gets the job done, Matthews, Nylander, Riley, they should love this hire. And if they don't because they're worried about his approach or his attitude or pushing buttons, then I'm not sure they're the right guys, and that's on Brad Treliving and company to figure that out.
It's a new era in Toronto, new leadership at the very top, and now a new voice behind the bench. The changes have begun, and you get the sense there's still lots more to come.